Hey guys, Jay here and welcome to another cosplay tutorial. In the previous video I made Dark Magician Girl's wand, so I figured why not go the extra step and make the hat as well. So yeah, I figured it would be a good idea to also make the hat. Who knows, one of my friends might want to cosplay Dark Magician Girl in the future. So before I start the actual build, if you want to follow along at home, you can go to the link down in the description that'll take you to my website where you can get the full template. I do also want to mention that in the template there is a little bit of a confusing part. I talk about the brim needing to be off-centered to the right a little bit, so I'll just show you that right here. If you look at it straight on, you can tell this is angled to the right. So that's what I meant. As you can see, there's a seam here and a seam here and they aren't centered. It's pretty obvious, but if it's something that you just read in text, it can be pretty confusing. And then one more thing, the foam that I used for this was bought at Arta Wigs, so I'll link that down in the description as well. I think their sheets are a better price. You just can't get wide things out of it. So if you wanted to make like Captain America's shield out of a single piece, you wouldn't be able to do it because this isn't wide enough. This is only about 15 inches, where Captain America's shield is about 22 inches or more. So for this, I made the entire thing out of one sheet that's 15 inches by 40 inches. And that was only $9 plus like $8.50 or something for shipping. Whereas no Joann's around here even has the Yayahan 10mm foam, which means I have to order it. And it was about $35 for one sheet. So you can really start to see where the savings are. I'd rather go the cheaper route if I have to. Anyway, let's get on into the build. For this entire project, I'll be using 10mm craft foam. I start by tracing the hat template onto the foam twice, with one of them being mirrored. This will make both the left and right halves of the hat. When cutting them out, make sure the majority of it is cut at a 90-degree angle, except for the tip. About 3 to 4 inches down from the tip, you'll need to transition the cut to be at a very large angle, otherwise it won't glue together properly. Ignore my right and left markings in the video, I accidentally did them on the opposite sides. They are correct on the template though. I used the heat gun to heat form the hat pieces and curl them in to give them the correct rounded shape. Then I used contact cement to glue the two halves together. Here's why I transitioned to a larger angle cut for the tip. If I didn't, it would be physically impossible to glue the edges together. This makes it possible. And afterwards I had to actually re-glue it, because the seam popped back open, after only about half a day. Sadly, I lost the footage for this part, but I traced and cut out the visor? Brim? The front part. I'm just gonna call it the brim. So I traced and cut out the brim template out of the same 10mm sheet, just like the other pieces, except I cut a roughly 45-degree angle for all of the sides. This will give an illusion of it being thinner than it really is, as well as the front and back seams need to have a peak, and that's how you do that. And I also heat formed it the same way. Then I glued the front and back seams with more contact cement. And here you can see that peak that I was talking about. Now that the basic build is done, I can nest the two pieces together to see how they'll fit to make sure if I need to do any adjustments. Luckily I didn't, and you won't have to worry about that either as the templates were made from these parts, so they're already the right size to begin with. To make all the raised detail, I cut 15mm foam dowels in half lengthwise. In fact, I cut about 3 of them this way. There'll be a link in the description to some that are already factory cut this way. But to be honest, buying the Yayahan 5-pack of these and cutting them in half is way cheaper, as the factory cut half dowels are only a couple dollars cheaper, but you only get one 3-foot piece. Whereas cutting the 5-pack in half is only a couple of dollars more, and you end up with 10 2-foot half dowels. The choice is yours. Either pay more for a nicer looking piece, or pay less, but have to cut them out and just hope you don't ruin them. I ended up needing to Dremel a large angle on the inside lip of the cone part of the hat. If you just cut this part out at a large angle and only use the Dremel to smooth it out, it'll save you the headache. I glued the dowel halves around the top and bottom of the brim, around the front of the cone's base, as the rest of that section will be covered by the brim anyway and doesn't really need any detailing, and the rings around the cone. For the corner areas of the brim, I just cut out the length that I needed and then cut them at different angles so that everything fit without looking all bunched up. You're gonna have to figure that out yourself. And for the cone rings, I didn't measure at all, I just guessed their placements. A small pencil bin I had just happened to be the right size for the spiral detail on the left side of the brim. So I used that to make a circle on 10mm foam and freehand draw the spiral. Obviously, if you're using the template that I made, you can just trace that. I cut it out with a hobby knife, which was honestly extremely sloppy, so afterwards I used the Dremel to smooth down the sides, but I also needed it to heavily round off the edge. And now I can start to paint the whole thing. And I do this before gluing any of the 3 pieces together. I start by covering everything with a few coats of black plastidip spray, followed by cobalt blue acrylic paint over the entire cone and brim. If you saw my wand tutorial, you'll probably know that I used primary blue for that. Well, I ran out and no store anywhere near me had any, but I tested this and cobalt blue up against primary blue showed they were exactly the same shade, so it's all good. After that dried, I masked off around the dowel halves so that I could paint those, as well as the spiral detail with fuchsia acrylic paint. Also, I forgot to mention, before painting this piece, I used a Dremel to engrave the spiral into the foam, and then after the fuchsia paint, I lined the spiral with black paint. Once everything was dry, I removed the tape and glued all the pieces on with superglue. I provided a 2D mock-up in the template file of how they would be glued together, but just so you know, I used a dab of glue on either side of the half dowels at the base of the cone, and glued the brim to those points. Then I just glued the back together. Once that dried, the last step was to hit it with a satin clear coat. Alright, there you go, Dark Magician Girl's hat. I do want to state that this does not sit on your head just as is. It will move around and slide off. There are a couple different options that you can do. You can either make it bigger so that it fits on your head, that's up to you. You will also, need to make that the right size. So do that on like paper first and make sure that it fits around you and then scale it accordingly. This was made for a head slightly smaller than mine, which would be about the same size as someone's head that'll fit into wigs from Amazon. So for like me, those don't fit me at all. I need the bigger wigs. So I made sure this was a little bit smaller because a lot more people will be this size rather than my size. So just be aware of that when you're making it. Also, these 15mm foam dowels that I cut in half seem to be just a little bit too big. So you could go with 10mm dowels if you wanted. So as you're looking at it right now, if you think the trim detail here is a little bit too thick, then you may want to go with the 10mm dowels instead. That's completely up to you and it's not in the template at all. Anyway, that's going to do it for this. If you like it, go ahead and give it that thumbs up, subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys later.